Good morning. It is Sunday morning, my GenXRants nation. I'm your host, David. I'm here to talk about what it is today. Well, my spiritual journey. And I'm going to try to Coles note it, crunch it down, and just keep it real simple and basic because this is the intro episode. So, as I said before, if you check out my welcome video, every day we're going to have a different rant topic. Every day will be something unique to me. And you'll notice today I'm not wearing my hat. The only day I probably won't wear my hat is on a Sunday because I'm heading to church or going to do something like that. So, my spiritual journey is one of a Christian. I was very young when I was introduced to Christianity, but that doesn't mean that I was a Christian. Christianity became more and more a part of my life as I got closer in a dynamic relationship with Jesus Christ, because that decision is based on you personally. No one can, I guess, adopt you or make you or decide for you that relationship. That relationship has to be between you and Jesus. And that's what happened to me. So I really remember accepting Jesus Christ into my life when I was 8 years old, just a young guy. And you might think that's too young, but I think the decision making of our lives is each different. You might be older, you might be younger, but it's no less important. We make big decisions in our life. And I know it was a big decision because I remember exactly where I was, what I was doing, and who I was with when I prayed that prayer when I was young. Now, does that mean I was transformed and just completely different person and that didn't have struggles or questions or uh, really wrestle with my faith at the time? No, not at all. Actually, the journey was quite difficult and I made a lot of struggling decisions in my life. And during that time when I was 8 years old, also something happened to me that really was I guess, the opposite of that. In one sense, I had accepted Christ and I was a new believer. In the other sense, I was taken advantage of, and it's a very difficult thing to talk about. And I was physically, let's just say, inappropriately dealt with, and that was nobody in my close family. Just so anybody knows, and it's irrelevant who it was. I've forgiven them a long time ago, but that really damaged me as a young man, as a young boy, and it made it very difficult. And at the same time, had I not had Jesus, I don't know where I would have been because it was a struggle that I had the rest of my life, which is, this had happened to me is very traumatic. Eventually, it affected how I treated women and how my relationships were and how I dealt with my personal life, uh, my thought life. All of that was affected because of that traumatic event. And that traumatic event was always countered with my experience with my faith in Jesus Christ and how it really that journey went. So this much of my big journey. Maybe that's over sharing. And if it is, I do not blame you if you hit stop on this video now and don't want to go any further. But life is not easy. Many things happen to many of us. And I don't think even as a Christian you're promised that life will be any easier. Now, God is with you, so therefore you'll have peace. You'll have understanding many times when you're confused. And God has really guided me in many times in my life and my decision making. So that journey, I've hit many paths where you hit like, should I go left or should I go right? And God has been there and really directed my life. So that is part of my faith journey. So 8 years old, 14 years old. For those that understand the other spiritual, I got baptized in the Holy Spirit. When I was older, that was about 14, and I also got baptized in water. Now, to my faith, I know there's some faiths out there, Christian belief systems. I believe the Baptists believe that you have to be baptized in water as well as accept Jesus Christ in your heart. I don't believe that. I believe baptism personally, and the Bible really backs this up, is that it is a outward expression of what Christ has done inside of you. So that's more of a public expression, and it's a representation of the change. Like when Jesus, if you study the Bible, he was baptized by John and he went underwater, and it's a new life. So that's why water baptism is important. It's not any sort of magical thing God does through water baptism, but it is a transforming thing in the sense of it's a public statement of what has happened in here and up here. So that's in my opinion, and you can disagree, but that's where I come from that perspective. So the journey was difficult. I very struggle with my thought life and stuff like that. And but I'll tell you this quick little story. I was working at a retail store. I won't tell you where that is or who it was. I don't want to get sued, but they don't even exist anymore. But I was working and I was pulling out some stock, and um, I heard, and this has never happened afterwards except one other time. So this is very rare to happen. It's God getting your attention. If you read the Bible, Saul at the time, who became Paul, he had to have a very personal, literal experience with Jesus coming to talk to him. So don't worry, I'll make this quick. So I was doing that. I heard someone say, and I'll say someone, Dave, don't you think you should have Bible college? So I'm about 17. I'm just about to graduate. Summer is coming up. I had plans to go to Disneyland and all of this stuff, and those plans kind of got derailed because, when I heard that, I thought somebody from church or one of my friends was playing a practical joke on me. So I was looking around, like, who said that? And I was like, I must be working too hard. It was Friday or Thursday at the time. I was like, wow, like I don't know if I'm stressed or something. So I kept working. And then not soon after that, I heard a voice, exact same voice, very audibly say, Dave, don't you think you should be at Bible college? When you have those experiences, and again, very rare, um, I was like, man, I thought somebody again. I'm looking around now. I'm looking like behind the pallets and around the shelving and stuff like that, and I see no one. And there's no one. The store is pretty. It's getting close to close, so no one is there in this section that I'm working in. And then I keep working. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. Then I heard for a third time, and I realized, and God, funny enough, works in threes a lot of times. I heard that voice again, and I knew it was God speaking to me. And the funny thing is that I never told anyone. I took it home. I tossed and turned that night in my bed, like, why are you asking me to do this, God? I never had that intention in my life. I never wanted to go that direction. That's not part of my journey, so to speak, that I ever thought I would be going on. Like, I didn't have that in the front of my mind, right? It wasn't part of my plans. I didn't even really have any plans, to be honest, at the time. I was kind of all over the place when I was young, bit obsessed with relationships and not really career minded or goal minded. So, but God was trying to get my attention. And so I prayed on it. I never told my mom, never told anyone, literally told no one about this. And next night it was youth. So we were at youth at the youth leader's house. We were playing some games, and the pastor of our church, who never comes to youth, very rarely, maybe once every 6 months, was happened to be there. And so the pastor was there, and we were playing a game and we were laughing, having fun. Again, didn't tell anyone because I thought maybe I'm just losing my mind, right? Like I prayed about it. God, if this is you, make it clear. Like if that's not clear enough. So pastor's there and he says out of the blue, last night I was praying. So the night before on Thursday, God really brought to me. So people, the night before or when I was working, God spoke this. And also to the pastor the night before, God had spoken to him and said, have you thought about going to Bible college? And there you go, people. So, to make a long story short, Coles noted, ended up checking into it. My mom was not happy with that decision, but I did it anyways. Headed to Bible college. The road was open, the funds were open. Now, that's not to say Bible college was like transforming, changing thing in the sense of the things I struggled with. It was in many ways, but in essence, it wasn't. But it did make me realize that what I did know about the Bible and God and all those things, my eyes were like super open to the historical, the exegesis, all of these terms that you might not be familiar with. I wasn't familiar with. Things that you don't really learn when you go to Sunday school or church, for an hour or 2 hours a week. And we attended church quite a bit when we were younger. Like at that time, we were always doing church things, but I never heard these things like talking about who wrote the book, like how they're all tied together, the Old Testament prophecies that led to Jesus, all of these things, and that they came true. Even what's argued today, like what is faith? What is salvation? All of these things, like what are the steps to all those things? I never heard of that, and I learned all that in Bible college, and it really grew me in a word sense and a spiritual sense. Now, did I still struggle with those things that I mentioned earlier? Absolutely, that was part of the journey. And so all these things led. I went to Bible college, had some disagreements which is part of my life. I don't always like to say, yes, that's why I'm a Gen Xer. I rant. I have this personality sometimes that pushes against people, and some people can't handle that. And sometimes I can't handle it either. So I ended up after about two and a half, 2 years, 2.5 years almost. Then I went back to where I lived. Um, and I really struggled with purpose and stuff like that. And some of the friends that I had met at Bible college asked me to move out east and for new opportunities, and so I did. And so that led me eventually to meeting my wife, getting some healing from those hurts that had happened to me when I was younger, and growing in the Word and getting participate in church. We helped with some church plants. We weren't the pastors or anything, but just God's calling on your life and how dramatic it can be and dynamic it can be. And there was many times in my life where I struggle, even in marriage or with work or whatever. And I kept coming back to that common denominator of God and praying to Jesus and saying, Jesus, like I'm struggling here. I don't know what to do. And God would always open that path, that part of my life and give me peace. I think we struggle a lot of times and don't realize like what is the purpose of why God has you where you are? Good example to the present is, we were out east. I met my wife, we had 2 kids, but a lot of the things, especially during COVID, were very traumatic to my kids and they needed a change, just like I needed a change. And so we really prayed about it, and God just said, "Yeah, go back to where you grew up, which is Alberta." And again, I'm not going to give you details of where that is, but we came back to this province, and it's been not perfect, but a struggle as well. My wife found some work, but eventually, because I was working remote, my job at the time didn't want to continue on with that arrangement. So therefore, I wasn't fired, but they just let the arrangement we had fall. There was no more signing me back on or letting me work remote, and I had no job. And that was 18 months ago, almost to this day or close to this day. And it's a struggle because you're like, well, this is part of the journey, like God. And I've applied, like you hear the story probably all over the place that people apply, they put out hundreds of resumes. You realize that Alberta's economy is not the same as Ontario's economy. And maybe if you live in the States or somewhere else in the world, you realize that like one place in your own country compared to another place could be dynamically different. And the skills that you had gained in that place might not apply to where you are now. And then you've got to, like, as me, are you going to, if you have a faith journey, if you have that relationship with God, are you going to trust in him still, like I have through, my Cole's Notes journey that I gave you? Are you going to trust him to deliver you and give you like the finances and all the things going on now? Like you could, I could personally, there's a lot more going on I'm not going to bring up in my life that are personal. Nothing dramatic about marriage or anything like that, but the job, parents, kids, like kids are going to college now. That's how old I am, right? I'm almost 50. So kids are going to college. And how do you provide when you don't have an income? Only your wife does it. God provides. And if anything I can get across is the journey that you go with God. Sometimes it's not easy. It's not promised. I mean, all the disciples ended up being martyrs. Jesus was crucified on the cross and he actually did nothing wrong. I mean, study that. There's a lot of Old Testament where the prophets are doing the right thing, and yet the people are just, they're rebellious. And that's how we are as people. We're rebellious. We don't want to listen. We don't want to do what God asks us to do. We don't want to, on that journey, go down the path that God has asked us to go down. And because of free will, thank him for free will. He'll let us, the consequences of what we do, still loving us, still caring about us, come out and, affect what happens. Although he's still got his hand on us when we trust in him. So God's really had his hand, his voice. And And like I said, don't let that first story, like, scare you away because it's never happened. I don't recall God ever verbally speaking to me, since, but God speaks in here and he speaks up here. The Bible talks about that still small voice, right? There's a still small voice, which is the Holy Spirit guiding and trying to get our attention. You might say, I don't believe in God. A lot of people that don't believe in God and very angrily don't believe in God, usually it's based on their experiences that they've had with Christians or church. And I'm not trying to excuse those experiences, or something traumatic's happened. Why did you take my mom? Why did you take my wife? Why did you take my kids? And I understand those things. And God understands those things too. But at the end of the day, it's like, you know, it's still about a relationship with him. And I know this might irk somebody. Maybe you've listened this long and you're like, I hate what you're saying, Dave. I just can't stand what you're saying. God is, if he was a loving God, why does he allow evil? And I'm like, evil comes from people, right? Evil comes from the devil. I believe there's a devil. And first realizing that our hearts in here, because of sin, we're not good. That's the first lesson you have to learn in life is that my first instinct and decision is never a good one. Usually it's a very selfish one. And selfishness is usually sinfulness. Other than, I would say, selfishness is you're not going to get out of the way of my relationship between me and God. That's a good selfish, right? There is good parts of that. But then the selfish is that, no, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to listen to God. I'm not going to, me first, not my family, or me first. You know, And that's a struggle we all have. And I think the world is like, oh, well, bad things happen. Why doesn't everybody have their own home and their own, why are kids sick? Why do people die of cancer? Well, that's part of the journey maybe that we'll talk about on Sundays is what is it that the Bible talks about? What is it that this faith journey is? Is it all about, like, I think too many people think God is a genie that you rub the biblical lamp and you just believe and he'll give you whatever you want. And they use verses like, oh, God will give you the desires of your heart, but not remembering that first I become like Christ. So what is it God wants me to do? My heart becomes his heart. And therefore, what I desire is actually what he wants, not what I want. There's a big difference between those two things. And a lot of people don't take that into consideration when they study the word. They don't properly, you know, have the context of what they're studying. And again, you might disagree, and that's okay. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm just talking about my journey today. So I hope that spoke to you, and that's just a quick Coles notes. And we're gonna go over Sundays at least. You don't have to watch Sundays. I got a lot of other content. God might get a little bit involved, but most of that other stuff is just my thoughts, and a lot of that will be based on the core of my beliefs, which happen to be my Christian faith. That's okay. You don't have to have a Christian faith. That's between you and, the guy upstairs, not between you and me. And if you have questions or you know, anything like that, put them down in the chat. I'd love to hear it, um, and to go through that with you. And thanks so much for listening, guys. I appreciate it. And you have a great day. God bless.